Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Rameumptom, Ruminations. My name is Scott, and I'm the host. Today's episode is called Navigating Faith Triggers. Thanks for coming back to listen to another episode of the podcast today. As I said last week, it feels great to be back behind the microphone and having these conversations with you guys. I want to thank a bunch of the listeners for reaching out over the last couple of weeks after I posted that recent episode to welcome me back and greet me with such kind words. Some of the comments were fun to hear. One of my favorites, there was a listener, James, who said, "You and your mellifluous voice have been missed. Welcome back." Person of interest said, "Oh, glad to hear your voice again, Scott. Looking forward. Love you from South Africa." Those two that I listed and many others were on the YouTube page where I posted the last episode. Want to just say up front, the current plan is to post every other week. If my schedule dictates, I might miss a week or two, but the current plan right now is to do every other week. And hey, maybe I might throw in one every week here and there too, just to kind of make up for a missed one. But right now the plan is to post every other week. I had some other great comments. There was a listener, John, who commented on the website that I really liked what he had to say here. He says, "Hey Scott, great to hear that you're back and healthy. I enjoyed your comments on the best revenge. It raised a few discussions in our family. The only issue I have is that this remains one-sided. As an ex-Mormon, I know what life as an active Mormon is, but an active Mormon doesn't know what life is once I leave. They believe the rhetoric that the leaders provide in explaining why people leave: lazy, want to sin, never had a testimony, etc. But they, including family members, don't ask why I left, and apart from not wanting to offend or be offended, arguing, they just don't ask, but remain happy to talk about church and blessings in their lives, and of course, why they think I left. It's too one-sided." He says, "Reminds me of a vegan joke. When you, as a meat eater, invite a vegan couple to dinner, you accommodate their diet by preparing a vegan dish just for them. But when the dinner date is reciprocated, the vegan couple would not think to accommodate a meat eater's diet for their dinner date. That's how the interactions are with family members, still active. Looking forward to more meatier episodes. Welcome back." So thanks for the comment, John. Loved it. And I wanted to use that as a jumping off point for continuing the discussion that we had in the last episode. This feeling is so real, at least in my own personal experience. I want to talk a little bit today about emotional triggers and how that relates to the lived experience of being an ex-Mormon and still having close family or friend relationships with people that are still active in the church. I'm going to give a brief breakdown on emotional triggers, different types of emotional triggers, and how they might present themselves as we're interacting with our family members. And to start it off, I'm just going to give an example. Some of this will sound familiar to what we talked about last week, but we're gonna come at it from a little bit of a different angle. When we go to our family members' houses or our friends' houses that are still active, believing members of the church, we are confronted with visual stimuli, auditory stimuli. We're greeted with images of LDS temples or a framed picture of the proclamation to the family, sometimes with a picture of the wedding couple, right next to it. There might be a picture of the prophet or past prophets or of Joseph Smith. As we go into our family members' houses or our friends' houses who are still active members of the church, they decorate in a way to show their faith as a reminder to themselves and to others what they believe. But those seemingly innocuous decorations to them can be triggering to someone who has left the church. When I see a picture of Joseph Smith, my first thoughts are not kind ones. Frankly, they're very unkind. When I see a picture of the temple, I have this visceral, uncomfortable feeling when I see a picture of a temple. It could be we go into their houses and we see a board on the wall talking about family home evening or about any other aspect of living in the LDS church and being part of the culture. We go in and we are thrust right back into this world that we intentionally left. It can be conversations. It can be them. It can be sitting and overhearing talks about a missionary experience or talks about their callings and the things that they're doing for their ward. To them, these are innocuous. They're simply talking about their daily lives, but they don't recognize the pain and hurt this can cause someone who has left the church. So, what is an emotional trigger or a trauma trigger, as some people call them? A trauma trigger or an emotional trigger is a stimuli that reminds our brains of some sort of traumatic event or experience. They will kick off that fight or flight response, but it's a reminder of some sort of past trauma that we have. Now I'm going to be vulnerable here. I have a bit of PTSD. I have a couple of trauma triggers outside of the LDS religion. A number of years ago, I was attacked by a dog, and I kind of a harrowing experience. I had to fight this dog off of me, and it was very traumatizing. During the attack, it bit my arm and broke the skin in a couple of places, and I had to fight this dog off of me before the owner could go and come and get it. And now, anytime I see a large dog, small dogs don't usually trigger this, but whenever I see a large dog, I immediately go into that fight or flight mode, and I feel my pulse quicken. I usually get thoughts wondering how what I should best do to fight this dog. If it came in attacked, or if I'm with my kids, like how could I protect my kids from this dog? And this was something that had never occurred to my brain before I was attacked. Before this dog, charged at me, knocked me on the ground, and started biting my arm, I never once thought about fighting dogs when I see them, or if I could protect my kids from a dog if it's walking past on the side of the street. This event was traumatic, and now I have a trauma trigger. Every time I see a large dog, I wonder about how I would fare in a fight against it. And my pulse quickens. It's a whole thing. And my wife, bless her heart, she'll hold my hand or she'll calm me down, and she recognizes what I'm going through because she knows me well. This sort of response to a past trauma is something that many people experience. It can take a long time to heal. Now, I want to say outright, I am not a therapist. Don't come here for therapy. I'm giving you secondhand therapy, giving you things that I have learned through therapy. I'm going to relate this back to the LDS faith. Those of us that are ex-Mormon, we've left. We're now, thriving, doing great outside of the church. Maybe we're trying not to think about the faith as often. When we're with our family that we love and that we're trying to keep incorporated into our lives, or our friends that are still members of the church, and we see their lifestyle, the things that they're doing, the way they decorate their homes, the way they dress, you'll see them in garment, you'll see the garment lines or whatever it is. Many of these things can become emotional triggers for us to relive the pain that we felt while we were in the LDS faith, to relive all of the moments that led us to leaving the church. So just from seeing a little picture of the proclamation of the family on the wall in someone's house can make us feel all of those emotions all over again. Last week, we talked a little bit about tribalism as one of the motivators for believers in the faith to talk and think the way that they do in such an exclusionary way, to of us that have left. So if we confront our family and friends about the way that they talk around us, if they're talking about a friend's kid who's going on a mission, or they're talking about their callings, that sort of thing, when we approach them and say, hey, I'm not interested in talking about that, and they go on the defensive, or they're unwilling to change, when believing members of the church allow space for those of us that have left, it invites doubt. And one of the many things that the church preaches against is doubt and the dangers of doubting. There have been many podcast episodes and discussions about thought-stopping discourse from leaders of the church to its members to discourage any sort of doubt. They see doubt as an enemy to faith, and they try to squash it out as much as they can. So if a believer creates space for a non-believer, they're inviting this doubt into their lives, or they could be. And maybe there's a fear of the unknown, a fear of viewing the world differently. There's a lot of motivating factors for why our family members behave the way that they do. For my own experience, I think a big part of it is I never had a relationship with them outside of the context of religion. I mean, yes, we did some fun things, but religion was always one of the core things that held us together as family. And now that linking chain is no longer there was no other parts of the relationship that tied us deeply together outside of a shared memory of growing up in the household. But our lives now, the only things that we had in common were the church, and that's what we would talk about. And so now that that's no longer something that I want to discuss with them, it seems as though there's nothing left to talk about. I want to bring up a philosopher named John Rawls real quick. He had this interesting thought experiment called the veil of ignorance. John Rawls was born in 1921. He passed away in 2002. He was a moral, legal, and political philosopher. Published a number of works, and the one I'm gonna cite today is called A Theory of Justice. This one was published in 1971. In this, now he's talking about it as a way to like run a society and find the most just way to operate as a community. But he talks about this thing that he calls the veil of ignorance, and it's the idea that if you could, I mean, it's similar to the LDS term, the veil that we pass through in the plan of salvation. But it's the same idea. It's what if this person that we're talking to, what if everybody that was running this community could pass through a veil of ignorance and forget everything about themselves when they are adjudicating or when they are making decisions about what's best for the community. If they could forget everything about themselves, what sorts of decisions would be made by those people? And the reason I bring it up here is because I wonder how my family members would behave towards me. I wonder how believing members of the church would behave towards us if they could pass through this veil of forgetfulness and forget all of the conditioning that they've received on how to treat ex-Mormons. How would they treat us instead? If no member of the church, no leadership had said, oh, they are fallen, oh, they are sinners, oh, they are lost, they're lazy learners. If those ideas had never been put in their heads, how would they interact with me? How different would that look? And I guess what this gets at for me is compassion. It's an understanding that if they operated in a way that recognized that their beliefs weren't universally true, how would that change their actions? And I can apply the same thing to us and how we, those of us that have left ex-Mormons and whatever path we're walking on now, if we operate and thought under the supposition that our beliefs aren't universally true, if we recognize that the opinions and the thoughts that we think are our best understanding of the world around us and we could be wrong, how would we act differently? How would that sort of mentality change the way that we interact with our family and friends? Now, I'm not saying that they're not capable of changing and that we shouldn't encourage them to change. I think it's important for us to set boundaries when we talk to our loved ones. If they're only talking about the church, we can ask them to stop. We can find other things to discuss. I think the experience that many of us have is that our family and friends don't ever want to discuss why we left. They have their opinions. They're going to keep them to themselves. There's very little reciprocity in the relationship, at least in my experience. This isn't going to be universally true. And I should comment, I recently have run into a few people who are believers, active members of the church. One was just recently a stake president, and the other one was just released as a bishop. And getting to know them and having an upfront conversation. We were brand new acquaintances. They never knew that I was a member of the church. Going into the conversation, I had an inkling that they were, and I just kind of wanted to test the waters and had some great conversations, very candid. I was open with them about, I'm asking about their faith and, what it means to them. And I was open about leaving the faith and what that experience was. And it was I just had some excellent conversations, very, very insightful and accepting of the differences. Maybe this will be ironic for some of you for such a great statement to come out of this person. This is 11 years ago. Dallin H. Oakes in the conference talk, Loving Others and Living with Differences. Isn't that great? That's sounds like a great subject. One of the quotes that he says, and it's the tagline of this talk, if you go and look it up on the church website, but it's about halfway through the talk when he says this. But he says, where vital, our side of the differences should not be denied or abandoned. But as followers of Christ, we should live peacefully with others who do not share our values or accept the teachings upon which they are based. I think that is an amazing statement, and I wish that were practiced by more people. Where vital, our side of the differences should not be denied or abandoned. That's totally fair. Member of the church can believe what they want, but then he encourages the members of the church to live peacefully with others who do not share our values or accept the teachings upon which they are based. Live peacefully with those that don't believe. I think that's excellent advice. One of the holes that's left in our lives after we leave the faith is that support group, is that community. Sometimes that's filled by family, sometimes that's filled with friends. And as we continue to interact with those that are still in the faith tradition, it can be triggering. It can be hard to navigate that space. And sometimes we might need to take a break from them. It is incredibly important for us to find non-religious spaces and traditions within our own family groups where we can live peacefully together. And if your family and friends aren't capable of providing that, then we need to look for it somewhere else. There's lots of different organizations around that can help with that sort of thing. One of the things that I have turned to more after leaving the faith is hobby groups and building community with friends that share the same interests. I don't have advice for people's day-to-day lives. I've barely figured out my own. Many of you know that I struggle with depression and all sorts of other issues. Dealing with these interactions is going to be a lifelong experience. And sometimes I have to take a break, and that's okay. And then sometimes I come back and am reminded why I took the break in the first place. The hardest thing for me is that I do love these people, and it's not their fault that their way of life is triggering to me. So it's been a learning experience to try to love them in a way that makes us both happy. Anyway, I've been rambling a lot on this episode, and I apologize. Thank you so much for listening today. This is something that I've personally dealt with for a long time. And being in a mixed faith marriage, navigating this space where my wife and I have different beliefs and different moral compasses, that has been a really growing experience for us. When we go to different places, is able to recognize these spaces that aren't welcoming to those of us that have left. And that's because she's been able to open up and accept the differences between the two of us. When she's in church, it's hard for her to hear the way people talk about ex-Mormons because she's married to one and she thinks I'm pretty great, at least some of the time. I did want to mention, I know some people in the past have asked me about movie recommendations and that sort of thing, because I go to the movies pretty regularly. I've got the AMC Stubs thing, so I try to go every other week, so I watch a lot of movies. So if anyone is interested, I do have the one social media, and I don't know that I'd even call it social media, but I started a Letterboxd account. And so I keep a journal of the movies that I watch and I write reviews of them. And it's been a blast. So I don't have Facebook. I mean, I still have my Facebook account and I check it very rarely now. But I don't really have anything else. But if you do want to find me on Letterboxd, my name on there is Scott CD. And you'll see a picture of me and my youngest on there. If you want to see what I'm watching, that's where you can find it. Thanks so much for listening today. The next time we're interacting with family members or friends or whatever the relationship is, and they're a believing person, pay attention to those trauma triggers, the things that they're saying or doing, or what they have on their walls, or maybe even the music that they're playing in their house, and pay attention to how the different stimuli affects our emotions. Be kind to yourself. If that sort of thing is hurtful to you and hard to be around, then notice what those triggers are and protect yourself, and whatever that might look like. I totally forgot to do something. There was a dumb joke that I used to say, and I can't remember if I did it in every episode or not, but so this is just my really dry, dumb sense of humor. But I'm going to try and see if I can guess what someone's doing right now. Wherever you find yourself out there, cleaning all the winter clothes out of your wardrobe and putting the spring ones in the front for all the warm weather we've got coming. I hope that you have an excellent day.